The Florida Panthers are one win away from their second straight Stanley Cup, but the Edmonton Oilers are determined to stop them. We'll hear from hosts of both teams as they prepare for Game 6. Plus, the Pittsburgh Penguins have a new coach and a new direction. We've got all that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here. Welcome, everybody, to the Monday episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. It is great to welcome back to the show Nick Zararis of Locked On Oilers. And Nick, a tough loss in Game 5 for the Oilers at home. I got to ask you this, a bit of a slow start in that game. Why do you think that the Oilers just did not seem ready at the drop of the puck?
That's been a recurring theme all year. In the regular season, they had a negative goal differential in the first period. They've been a slow starting team. And some of that, I think, is just stylistically that their preference is to create off of the counter, absorb pressure in the defensive zone, and then spring guys going back the other way. And that generally requires the other team to get going a little bit. And obviously, and I made the joke the other day, it's okay if they want to score first at some point in this series. It would go a long way. And it's been a real challenge. And that was really why it started to go downhill, kind of like the snowball effect on them last night, was Florida gets out to a 2-0 lead. You have 3 power plays you don't convert. And the real kick in the chin there is, this is the first game your penalty kill did a good job. You know, you could have absolutely swung this game. If you go 1 for 3 on those power plays and it's 2-1, or it's 2-2, and you're in the game, even if you're not playing great. And the Oilers got destroyed on the expected goals and the high danger chances last night. But if you're hanging around and you only need 1 flash play from McDavid, from Draisaitl to kind of steal it, that's a very different conversation. You know, if that Perry chance goes in, if that McDavid crossbar or post goes in, and that, yes, this is a lot of equivocating and moral victorying in a bad loss, but I don't feel the Oilers played as bad as the score reflected on them. And it's really important that you keep that in mind as far as going into a Game 6, which is going to be as difficult as can be. I mean, this Florida team, they sneak up on you in a heartbeat. They hung 3 on the Oilers in a blink. You know, McDavid finally scores. They're on the board. The crowd has a little bit of energy. And Florida comes down and scores 2 minutes later. It is so hard to get anything going consistently. And it creates these snowball downhill effects where Florida they start to choke the life out of you.
What does Florida do so well that limits the offensive chances of the opposition, the Oilers in particular?
They do a great job of diverting guys wide. When the Oilers enter the zone with speed, especially McDavid, they do a great job of corralling him to the outside. He's going to bring 2 guys with him. And when Connor gets frustrated, he'll start to just fire pucks to the middle in hopes that someone will be there. It'll hit a body on the way in. And to some effect, that has worked at points in these playoffs where Perry at the net front has been in and around a lot of those plays. I remember now talking about it. Perry had that one saucer pass where McDavid missed it by half a second. And if that pass gets over, and that's the biggest thing, the Panthers have taken away that center lane and the high danger chances, which is where Edmonton makes their money, those great players making those really special plays. They haven't really been there, and it's forced the Oilers to work extremely difficultly hard to get offense. You know, it's so hard where you gain the offensive zone, 1 pass, 2 pass, 3 pass, 4 pass to get 1 chance. If you need to string together 6 or 7 passes to get 1 decent look, and you need to do that to score 4 goals to come back and win the game, the math really starts to work against you because Florida is going to let you pass the puck around the perimeter if you gain the offensive zone. That's fine with them. They're good with that. And then they're going to go off the counter because they're so fast, because they have such a deep forward group, where guys like Marchand are playing specialized 3rd line minutes in air quotes there, because that line's been the best line in the playoffs. But when you have that, and no disrespect to guys like Adam Henrique who are trying their best here, but Marchand's still an elite player, and the Oilers don't have that degree of depth. So the margin of error, it's a lot smaller for the Oilers if they want to win these games.
You talked about McDavid being a little frustrated. He got a pretty goal off a nice pass by Bouchard on Saturday. Is that possibly something that could jumpstart him a little bit? Because the Oilers definitely need more offense from him.
That's the way I'm going to frame this to myself, that the best player in the world has 2 days to think about this. They got to get on that 8-hour flight and think about how badly they played and how badly they lost. And I think for a guy like that, they don't need any more motivation. I know that this is kind of killing him slowly, that they're in this spot again and they need to win 2 straight against one of the best teams we've ever seen in the Cap era. But I can't hurt. Anything you can use in that toolbox to just coax a little bit more out of you. You know, everybody after they won game 4 talked about the speech Perry gave after the first period. We've been here, we can do this. And being that it was Perry who doesn't speak up a lot, the guys kind of took that to heart and felt that was meaningful. So it can't hurt. Any tool in the toolbox, and God knows they need it, considering we don't know who the goalie is going to be for game 6, which is probably the single biggest question going into game 6. And it's never great. You know, that's the old Parcells quote. If you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. The Oilers have 2 goalies and they don't have one.
Who would you start and why?
I would flip a coin. There is no feel at all. Pickard probably just because the team plays better in front of him, but you saw the difference. You see the talent gap here when you saw the game last night. Bobrovsky didn't have to do a ton of work, like 20 shots the Oilers had, something along those lines. The Panthers had like 20, 25, and they scored 5. The margin of error is so small. And when Bob doesn't need to be incredible, he just needs to be okay. He's very capable of that. Is Skinner capable of just being okay? We haven't really seen that in this series. In the last series, yeah, against Dallas, against Vegas, both had really nice stretches, but Florida, they're such a dangerous team and they make the Oilers so uncomfortable in a variety of ways. There's no great feel here. I trust Chris Knobloch will make the right decision because he has pushed the goalie buttons perfectly for 2 straight postseasons, but it's hard to feel confidence in either guy right now.
Besides the goalies, who else needs to step up?
Anybody other than McDavid or Draisaitl. And that's the most cop-out answer imaginable because both of them are playing very well. They're both close to 10 points in this series. Draisaitl's got a couple tucks. McDavid got his first goal of the series last night. But anything, I would emphasize probably Evan Bouchard just because they need one of these defensemen to help them get a little more game control. And the Oilers don't mind playing defense, and the Oilers will tell you themselves, we are good at defense, and they get a little slighted when people talk about, you guys had such a good defensive effort, like they're not good at hockey. And they desperately need their defense to step up in this game 6 because just gaming it out in your head, you got to get to 3 or 4 goals if you're going to win this game, like baseline. And if Florida's going to score 4 or 5, how do you get to 4 or 5? And some of that is going to be, we need to play better defense. We need to steal a goal. We need a shorthanded goal. We need to go 2 for 5 on the power play in this game. Because ultimately for me, that was the differentiation last night. Neither team scored on special teams. The Panthers pulled away at 5-on-5. Very different hockey game if the Oilers can just get 1 and they get a little bit of energy. Because we've seen that where all it takes is 1 and they get going downhill a little bit and they start to get that energy. I mean, even the McDavid goal last night, okay, 8 minutes to go, down 3. It's not implausible that they can get it to 4-2. And then you start believing, you know, they did it in game 4. It's not impossible, but they do need to get that first one to start building a little bit of energy.
Going to be on the road game 6. How important are the first 5-10 minutes of this game?
I mean, you saw it in game 3. It was 3-0 after the first period. Game 4, excuse me. It was 3-0 after the first period, and they had to meticulously work their way back 1 goal at a time. And it took the better part of 2 periods to get all the way back into that game. The biggest thing is surviving those first 5-10 minutes because Florida is the fastest team I can recall seeing in the salary cap era. They are the most talented team, I venture to say, and just keeping the game on the tracks. You know, I always go back to the worst example of this was that Vikings-Eagles NFC title game where the first drive, Keenum throws the pick 6 and the game's over. You are on the road and you give up the pick 6 and then you get the ball back and, oh no, the crowd is into it. It's a big spot, and you know your guy, your goalie, doesn't have that steal the game in him the way Case Keenum didn't, and then the Eagles get going downhill, and it's the same thing here. The Panthers get that first one. Okay, everybody's looking around a little frazzled, and then the second one comes, and then like that, it's 3-0, and you need to work so hard just to get one, let alone three, against a team that's this good.
Going to be a challenge. Let's see if the Oilers are equal to it. Nick, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Locked On Oilers is available on all the major podcasting platforms and over on YouTube. You can follow my personal stuff. Twitter and Instagram are Nick Zararis, Nick Zararis, and then over on TikTok, it's Nick Zararis Sports.
All right, Nick, thanks so much.
Thanks, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track, but that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You could track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. I love eating out, but, not at the expense of my financial well-being. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you could use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Florida Panthers, Armando Velez. And Armando, one win away from back-to-back Stanley Cups. The one thing that impressed me is the way the Panthers just came out of the gate in Edmonton in Game 5 and took control of the tempo of the game. Talk to me about the effective starts that the Panthers have had in this series.
Yeah, and thank you once again, Gil, for having me on the show. And to think that, Sportsnet Stats even brought it up after the game, where the Panthers have been leading the series for 200 minutes, while the Edmonton Oilers have been leading for 33 minutes in the entire series. And the fact that they went into Game 5 with a 2-2 series for what it's worth, and the Panthers leading for all the 60 minutes of Game 3, and then a good amount of Game 4, and then just with taking their foot off the gas a little bit after the first period in Game 4. The fact that the Panthers have had a lead in every single game, and the fact that the Panthers have found a way to score in bunches. It's been second, it's been the third line, it's been power play 2 for the most part, 2 5-on-3 goals, a shorthanded goal. It's been waves that the Panthers have been in. And the thing is, now in Game 5, it was a low event game, when the majority of the games for this Stanley Cup final have been really high event. I messaged you personally in your DMs the other day during Game 5 that the first 4 games were the highest scoring games since the 1981 Stanley Cup final between the New York Islanders and the Minnesota North Stars. And then it went from that, although it said 5-2 as the final score, because 4 goals were scored in the third period. It was the type of game that the Florida Panthers wanted to play, that was really fit to. It was Florida Panthers hockey to a T, despite the final score of a 21-29 shot on goal advantage.
Got to ask about Brad Marchand. He has just shined in this series and throughout the playoffs. What has his addition at the trade deadline meant to this team?
I still can't believe that he's a Florida Panther to begin with. I just remember it, March 8th, around 2:55 p.m., that the Panthers are crossing the finish line, pulling what the Vegas Golden Knights did, similar to the Thomas Hertl trade. And everything with what the Panthers were making as far as trades, that was seen as gravy at the time, because the prior moves were Seth Jones, Nico Sturm, backup goaltender Vitek Vanacek, and then putting Brad Marchand there. It was adding another one of the infinity stones to the Florida Panthers, making them inevitable for them. And to think that he has been the main scorer for the Panthers, I mean, he has the most goals in a Stanley Cup final since Asa Tekkonen, former Panther, by the way. So that's another thing that what Brad Marchand is bringing to the table. And he's one of two players to score more than 5 goals in more than one Stanley Cup final. The other one is Mario Lemieux. So that is just good company that Brad Marchand is putting himself in, to think that he's doing this at 37 years old, looking for a new contract as well. And I mean, 14 years removed from his most recent cup, and to think that the newfound energy, the newfound purpose that he has found playing for the Florida Panthers. And he even spoke about it. I was in the locker room when he was discussing it, how sometimes there were certain times where he was making all those playoff runs where he kind of took things a little bit for granted. He spoke about especially 2023, where he doesn't remember sometimes some of the games that he played, some of the playoff series, because of sometimes they were maybe a little too thinking that they were guaranteed to win certain series, including that 7-game series against the Panthers. And also, he also spoke highly of even past teammates, especially Patrice Bergeron, on just getting him to this point, on having him grow so much as a pro, and then going into the same locker room as an Alexander Barkov, who's kind of like a Patrice Bergeron, maybe with a higher offensive upside for him. That is really how he's been able to fit. And the Panthers, being that hard bruising forechecking team, fits right so well with what Paul Maurice and company have here.
You talked about making Game 5 a low event game. How have they been able to accomplish that? I mean, you've got a team with McDavid and Draisaitl and Nugent Hopkins. How have they been able to minimize the chances that explosive team has had?
It's come down to just putting a body on them and then just closing the gaps whenever the Panthers force their opposition, especially with a speed team like the Edmonton Oilers, and they get on their cycle. That's when the Panthers are the most comfortable, because they are really great with their position, getting sticks on lanes, and also the fact that the Sergei Bobrovsky is able to see pucks easily, and they are able to get shot blocks in front, and also how they battle along the boards. The Panthers are not the type of team that also skate out on their own when it comes to breakout. They are, once the puck is on their stick, they're breaking it out really fast. And just getting it in transition, then getting it deep, getting a change, which they also keep the shifts really short. So also fresh bodies are also going on the ice. So that's another thing of just getting that F1 out there towards the M boards, and just getting to work, sticking a fork into the boards, and then also working those low to high plays. So it's kind of similarly to running the football, that they're getting a lot of time in the offensive zone. You're taking a lot of time off the clock by running the football in football. So relating that in hockey terms, getting the puck in deep, getting your change, and then pinning it to the boards, and then cycling the puck around. And that's how they've been able to just consistently keep the puck in their own offensive zone.
Give me an unsung hero for this playoff run so far. I mean, everyone knows Marchand and Bobrovsky, but give me a guy who's not making headlines, who is just quietly helping this team get to one win away from a cup.
I'm going to give you two. The first one is Nate Schmidt, playing on the third pair, playing on the second power play unit. That second power play unit has been really the unit that has been getting on the scoring. And also Nate Schmidt started with a bang in round number 1, getting those 3 goals against the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first 2 games, and then getting the 5 points in the first few games in the Stanley Cup final. Just quick getting the puck out of his own end, and also just with how big he is, he's also not one of those guys who loses the races to the pucks whenever the opposition does flip it in, and they're able to battle it out. And same thing with Eetu Luostarinen. I mean, closeout games, especially in the first 2 series for the Panthers, Eetu Luostarinen has been the superstar for the Panthers against the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Toronto Maple Leafs. And usually him and Tomas Nosek are the first two forwards out on the ice whenever the Panthers go on the penalty kill. So those are two of the unsung heroes for the Panthers. And to think that Eetu Luostarinen, he was a trade that the previous regime in Dale Talon made. That was Eetu Luostarinen for Vincent Trocheck. There's also Lucas Wallmark in as part of the trade as well. And Eetu Luostarinen was not seen as one of the big pieces in that trade. It was just a dump for the Panthers at the time. And he's been just an impactful player for the Florida Panthers. I mean, he also played under Ryan Wasowski, the current San Jose Sharks head coach, in the Charlotte Checkers when it was under the Carolina Hurricanes affiliate. So also learning a little bit from his time in the AHL.
One problem this team has had is letting up a little bit when they get ahead. It happened in Game 4. It certainly happened last year in the series. What do they have to do to prevent that from ruining this, being so close and yet, you don't want to blow it at this late point?
Yeah, I'll include also Game 1 in this series. They were up 3-1, and they only had a 2-goal lead for a minute and a half, and so they couldn't really get in on shutting things down in that game right before Leon Draisaitl ended it in overtime. So yeah, it was really just going back to just refocusing and going back to the blueprint of looking at Game 5 and looking at that game as that game that is the one game that you want to play. And the fact is that the Panthers last year, they went from Edmonton. They came back from Edmonton and knew that they had a chance to win on home ice. And although it was losing 3 straight, they knew that they wanted to go back to their game, and they found a way to do so in another low event game, which was a 2-1 win for the Panthers right before running the clock out at the end boards. And then Sean McDonough saying the Florida Panthers have won the Stanley Cup. So same thing, although this is going to be the last home game for the Panthers.
Yes.
Although they have won 10 of their 15 games on the road, you don't want to risk another chance of going back to Edmonton. So it's another chance for the Panthers. They're 5-4 at home in the postseason. So get your 6-1 and play to the same style that they played in Game 5 as the Panthers do have a chance now to repeat as Stanley Cup champions. Really strange of me to say that as a fan of this team for almost 20 years. Strange territory, I will say.
All right, Armando, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
They can follow me personally on X and Blue Sky at MondoMan12. They can follow the show account on X and Instagram at MondoMan12. And as we are recording this, the Checkers just scored in overtime. I just heard the broadcast. So Checkers just tied the series at 1. So make sure to check out all of my coverage on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and on YouTube.
All right. Thanks so much, Armando.
Thank you, Gil.
It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the co-host of Locked On Penguins, Hunter Hodies. And Hunter, it's been a pretty busy few weeks for the Pittsburgh Penguins. A new coach, a lot of change probably coming down the pike. Talk to me about Dan Muse and what he brings to the table for this team.
I think 95% of the fan base, actually that number's a little bit low. I think 99% of the fan base did not know who the heck Dan Muse was before Elliot Friedman dropped that bomb on Twitter that there was word that he was going to be named head coach. Literally 10 to 15 minutes later, the Penguins confirmed what Elliot had heard. I had heard of him only a little bit, but after reading up a bit more on him after Elliot dropped that tweet and after we had our episode, the more I really like him. And he was introduced to the media last week, and I try not to overreact to these intro press conferences. Sure, you can win them, but the main stuff you want to see is on the ice when the games really matter. But I felt like he was very cool, very calm, collected. He seems like he's ready for this opportunity. Everything I've read about him says that he's always the first one there, last one to leave. He's been really good with development. I mean, he's coached some really good young players. Will Smith has had a lot of really good things to say about him. Gabe Perreault is the same thing. Ryan Leonard has had a lot of good things to say about him too. He's coached Rutger McGroarty. He actually answered a question about that after the intro press conference, saying how excited he is to get to work with Rutger McGroarty again after that he had his little tryout run to end the season with the Penguins. But I think he very much showed that he belongs in the NHL after the way he played with Sidney Crosby. He's also coach with Lane Hudson, Logan Cooley, etc. So his bread and butter is development with younger players. And the Penguins, they're going to be trying to bring up as many young players as possible, I think, heading into this season. We know that Rutger McGroarty is probably going to be on this team. Same with Ville Koivunen. They both looked the part at the end of last season. But Tristan Rose, he could potentially be up. Owen Pickering but could potentially be up full-time. We have to see if Harrison Brunick makes the team. And I'm sure they're going to make other moves this offseason that bring in younger talent that is NHL ready or that has already been established in the NHL. So again, that's his bread and butter, but I'm also excited to see what he can do with the veterans on this team. He's also spoke a lot about those, Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Russ, Carlson, at least for now. We have to see if he gets traded, but I really like the hire, especially as I've gotten to know him, at least reading about him, especially more these last 7 to 10 days.
What is his approach? What style of hockey does he want to play once the puck is dropped?
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of puck support and puck pressure. I think the Penguins will also try to be a bit more responsible in their own end. It kind of felt like the Penguins were getting away from a lot of the good plays in their own zone these last couple of years under Mike Sullivan, which never used to be the case. I think Dan Muse wants to bring that back, and especially with puck pressure, he's shown an ability to really change up some of his tactics when you go back and watch some of the tape with the U.S. development program. And even before that, even when his teams were trailing, he would change a few things up and it would lead to some comebacks. And that's something that, Mike Sullivan, at least towards the end of his tenure, didn't really do as much. It would just be, his system, 0 to 100. He wouldn't make some tactical adjustments, especially these last couple of seasons. I think with Dan Muse, you might see that here. And I'm excited about that because this franchise has really needed some fresh, new, innovative ideas for these last couple of seasons, just because I felt like Mike Sullivan was getting a little bit stale here. And don't get me wrong, I think he's the best coach in franchise history, but every coach has an expiration date. And I think Mike had reached his here. So I'm excited to see what Dan Muse can do here with this team. But I think really puck support and puck pressure are the two biggest pillars of what he's going to try to bring for the Penguins here.
You talked about this team trying to get younger. Let's start with the draft. What is the approach at the draft? Is there a player you think they have their eye on?
But really best player available at number 11. There have been some rumors that they're trying to move up. I think it would only be for one player, Gil, and that is Porter Martone. Kyle Dubas really likes him. He should be going top 5. If I had my way, he would go top 4. I think he is one of the 4 best players in this draft. I think he is one of 4 players with Misa, Schaefer, and Higgins that could be NHL ready as soon as this season. I'm a really big fan of Martone. A little bit of a power forward, but also just a really good skill player. He's kind of like a hybrid in terms of skill and power forward. My buddy and I compare him to sort of a Blake Wheeler type player, something that the Penguins could really use in their prospect system. So if he starts falling to 7 or 8, I could see Kyle Dubas and company trying to potentially make a call to try and trade up because, in my opinion, he would instantly become the best prospect in the system by a mile. But that's someone who I think they have their eye on, especially if he drops. But outside of that, if he goes in the top 5, which I still expect, but you never really know, I think Victor Eklund makes a lot of sense. I know they met with him at the Combine. I think someone like Kayshawn Aitchison makes a lot of sense at number 11. I think potentially Ben Kindle, Cullen Potter. We can keep going down the list if you want. Brady Martin, of course, Jake O'Brien. I know that they like him a lot as well. So it's really best player ever available. And even though they dropped a couple of spots, I still think they're going to walk away with a fairly good prospect here. It's not going to be someone that's ready right away, probably, unless it's Porter Martone, but we still have to see on that. He might need another year, but it's still going to be someone that improves the system here. And we still have to see if they get the number 12 overall pick or if the Rangers defer it and send it to them next year.
You mentioned possible trade rumors concerning Erik Karlsson. What is the approach and what would they be looking for in return if they were to trade him?
Really a futures-based package if you can get, a second-round pick plus a prospect. Heck, even somehow if you can get 3 things in return, a roster player, a prospect, and a second, I would do that in a heartbeat. Heck, even a second plus a prospect, I think Kyle Dubas would probably do. Maybe he tries to squeeze out a first if they retain a little bit on Carlson, but I think in a perfect world, they really don't want to do that. 2 years left on the contract. I think of the three players, him, Raquel, and Rust, he is probably the most likely to go. I will never fault the Penguins for trading for him. It was a worthy experiment and a worthy trade to make, but it just hasn't worked out. Sometimes that happens with trades, Gil. Like you think you're going to do great with this, but it doesn't work out. I still would make that trade 10 out of 10 times. It just didn't work out the way the Penguins wanted to. And you know what? That's okay. So I still think he's probably going to get dealt this summer. The bigger question is what happens with Raquel and Russ. I still think the Penguins are going to be fairly active, though.
What else are they looking to add? I mean, you talk about younger players, but at what position, what skill set, what are they looking to do?
Honestly, like they could use another young forward or two, or probably 3 to 4 in their top 9, their top 12. They really need a bona fide top pairing defenseman on the left side. They do not have that player on that roster right now. Marcus Pettersson, he got traded. Matt Grzelcyk, he's walking. The only player that I really trust on the left side going into this season is Owen Pickering. Ryan Graves, he hasn't been good in the 2 years. Ryan Shea, he kind of is what he is, a number 7 defenseman, but they don't have a bona fide top pairing guy to play on the left side going into next season. I think that is one of their biggest holes that they have to fill. I don't think you're going to fill that probably via free agency unless you're signing someone to a 1-year contract or something like that. But if you want to do it long-term, you're going to have to probably trade for someone. There's been rumors about Bowen Byram. I like him, but you have to find the right partner for him. I don't think that's Chris Letang because I don't think Chris Letang can handle top pairing minutes anymore. No disrespect, to him. I absolutely love Tanger, but with where he is age-wise right now, I think he's better suited for a second or third pairing role. That's going to be a position that they really have to rework these next couple of seasons, the whole defensive group. I think you're not going to be able to fix this whole thing in one offseason. It's going to be multiple off seasons, but going into next season, I still think one of their biggest holes, if not their biggest hole, is on the left side and a top pairing left shot defenseman. Otherwise, getting some younger forwards into this lineup. I really think that's going to be the big way ahead here. And I really do think there's an avenue here where they can sell off some vets and B, potentially add an RFA via trade in signing that player to, maybe a 3 to 4 year contract, something like around those lines.
All right. Well, I know it's going to be a very interesting offseason in Pittsburgh. Hunter, why don't you tell everyone where they can find the podcast and where they can find you and your co-host on social media?
Yeah, you can follow the Locked On Penguins podcast wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, all those good platforms. And you can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodies. You can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. We now have Instagram. You can follow that at LockedOn_Penguins. And you can follow my co-host, Patrick Damp, at Synonym for Wet on all other social media platforms, Blue Sky, Instagram. He's not on Twitter, but he's on all the other platforms.
All right, Hunter, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. You could find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank my guests today, Nick Zararis of Locked On Oilers, Armando Velez of Locked On Florida Panthers, and Hunter Hodies of Locked On Penguins for joining me today. I'm Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, and I co-host the Friday edition along with Rachel Donner. We are here every day, Monday through Saturday, bringing you the biggest stories from around the hockey world. So hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks so much for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.